afternoon from sunny Ithaca, New York, home of Cornell University. I'm Nicholas Phillips, and we're so glad you're joining us for another hour of awesome programming with one of my favorite guests. For some people, working from home is perfect. For others, it's the 3-2 model, 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. Personally, I like a mix of working at home and in the office. But let's face it, taking a Zoom meeting can feel a lot different knowing that there's an unhappy child right next to you. Even if you're not taking a meeting, say you're working on a new prototype, that can be tough when an infant thinks it's a toy. As remote work becomes the new normal, a new work-life balance has taken hold. And as childcare becomes more and more difficult to find, no one has been affected more with this new work-life balance than parents, especially mothers looking to start a new business. A record number of women entrepreneurs are putting a pause in their work to help support their child's needs. My next guest is perfect for our conversation today, Boss Me, Entrepreneurship and Motherhood. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. We want our conversation to be as interactive as possible, so you can submit your questions by opening the chat dialog box in the top right corner of the player. We'll ask as many questions from you as time allows. We'll also be asking you some questions as well to help us kind of tailor our conversation. Now, you could submit your responses by scanning this QR code with your phone. We'll also be sharing some helpful resources as well, so keep a lookout for those in the audience chat as well. So to our first question, we want to know, where are you joining us from? We're actually right here in Ithaca, like I mentioned before, right across from Ithaca College. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Andrea Ippolito, the founder and CEO of SimpliFed. She also serves as the Director of Women Entrepreneurship and STEM at Cornell University and is a lecturer in the College of Engineering. She also happens to be the faculty author of many of our certificate programs, including Women in Product. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I know, it's so great to have you in studio. I feel like it's always been virtually over the last couple of years.
I know, which is good. And it's nice to be here as well.
It is. So I kind of want to baseline our conversation. Now, what was it like to be an entrepreneur maybe a few years ago before the pandemic happened and this whole shift happened?
Yeah, so I started my company, SimpliFed. We're a comprehensive baby feeding support platform. We get services covered by health plans at no cost to families. So I started this before the pandemic. And, before the pandemic, it was all about, meeting in person or, working through stakeholder meetings in person. And I am based here in Ithaca, New York. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I had a 1-year-old. I now have 2 daughters and a third one on the way. I'm 35 weeks pregnant. And before the pandemic, especially having a young kid, my journey looked a lot different, perhaps say, than someone that was in their 20s, pre-kids, that could, hustle 24/7. And don't get me wrong, I hustle 24/7. It just looks a little different. My effectiveness and efficiency of working has always been pretty right on with having kids, but the time horizon has taken me a little longer. But pre-pandemic, it was a lot of in-person meetings, and I know that is a stopper for many people, whether you're starting your own company or you're working in a large organization, for-profit, nonprofit. And so after the pandemic, it was, terrible what happened during the pandemic for so many reasons. It was a worldwide tragedy that I hope never happens again. But from every crisis comes opportunity, right? That old adage. And what happened is that by forcing us to be at home, we showed folks that we can be effective and efficient despite what some CEOs are saying. And working from the office isn't going to work for everyone. But what we saw is, while a record number of women left the workforce during the pandemic, we actually saw an increase of women starting companies. When you look at 2019 compared to 2021. In 2019, there was a whole lot less women starting companies, 28%, whereas during the pandemic, 49% of new companies were started by women. And one of the hypotheses is because there was a more flexible work environment. So there's definitely some positives and negatives, but my own lived experience was it was a lot easier in a weird way after the pandemic because there was a much more flexible work environment.
And I want to thank the audience for your response. So it looks like we have kind of people joining us from all over the place. We have Guadalajara representing North Carolina. We do have Massachusetts, so somebody from our neck of the woods. And if you kind of had to generalize, what do you think people's biggest hurdle was when it came to starting a new startup?
So starting a new company is always incredibly difficult. It is hard to get traction. It is hard to get others to join your mission, especially if you don't have any money to pay them yet. And we'll talk about that in a second. But it's hard to get that initial little bit of evidence that there's a there always in startups. Coupled with the fact if you're a parent, especially a new parent, and it's hard to take that leap. For instance, I don't come from generational wealth. So the idea of just quitting everything, you hear that narrative in the startup community. Quit your job. Only the ones that are committed are those that have, fully left their day job. Well, let's be real. That is not going to work for most people, especially if you don't come from generational wealth. And when you have a family, you have a partner, or you have kids or other dependents, you need to feel a little secure in your job. So right then and there, that is just a major blocker for many people starting a company. And that's what happened with me, right? I had this baby and I didn't want to leave my day job just yet. So it took me a little longer to get off the ground. And by the way, we need to normalize that because starting companies isn't going to be like a 0 to 180. It's going to look different for everyone, and your ability to get traction is going to look different for everyone. And so it's so critical that we think about what are the infrastructures that we can put as a society in place to help people make that jump to starting a company, because we know that startups are the economic engine for this nation. So the more infrastructure we can put into place, and my strong hypothesis is that if we could better take advantage of half the population, women as part of that, then we could be developing whole new amazing innovations to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges, whether that's in healthcare or climate tech, wherever. But the infrastructure is not in place to help support, especially parents, whether that's paid parental leave, universal childcare support. There's so many things that we need to do as a society to better support entrepreneurs getting their organizations off the ground.
And do you find that a lot of people kind of want that to happen very, very quickly? Like you mentioned, go from 0 to 180 very quickly. Do you find that a lot of people want that to happen and you kind of have to tell them hey, it's going to be a longer process than you think?
So in the entrepreneurship community, there definitely is this mantra, and it's not necessarily a myth, it's like how it is they want to see traction quickly. And depending on what style company, if you're doing a venture-backed versus what is more deemed a lifestyle business, I don't like how they frame that. But if you're a venture-backed company, yeah, they do want to see you hit milestones faster. And I run a venture-backed company, and so I know what I signed up for there. That being said, I do think we need to take a step back and look at, well, how do we get more folks into this realm, such as women? And here's the deal. Redesigning this to make startups more welcoming to women and mothers isn't philanthropy, it's darn good business. But I'm going to share the data why. Startups founded by women are more profitable and they exit faster. So if you are an investor, it's in your best performance interest for your fund to invest in women, because it's been shown time and time again that we found companies that exit faster and are more profitable. So I do think it's time we take a step back and think about, yes, even if you're venture backed, how do we make it more welcoming to women and especially mothers? Because by the time you get enough experience, confidence, expertise in a particular area to start a company, it's coinciding with the time that many parents or women decide to have a baby. So if we want to have a more profitable economy, and we know that startups are the engine for that, then we need more folks participating. And the biggest pool of people we're not taking advantage of right now is women. And so we need to rethink the structures to help support it.
And how do we get, those statistics out there for investors? How do we put that to the forefront?
Well, first off, I think it comes down to having more women investors out there. We know, not surprisingly, that women tend to invest more in women. We also know that women tend to found companies that are more related to the needs of women, such as women's health. And I founded a women's health company. So, one big thing that we can do is get more women investors at the table. Now, here's the issue right now, is that best kept secret with the venture capital community is that venture capitalists have to raise money from somewhere. They have to raise money from what are called limited partners, or LPs. And those limited partners are pension funds, college endowments, sovereign wealth. And so we need folks like limited partners, like college endowments, to actually invest more in woman-led funds, which we know, by the way, invest more in women founders. So you see the cascade. And the thing is, they'll do better, as we talked about, because women-led companies are more profitable. And we know, actually, based on data, that women funds, so investors, do better. Why? Because they invest in women founders. So it actually starts, if you follow the money, just like most good things in business, it actually starts with limited partners investing more in female funders.
And I want to shift kind of a little bit. So this term work-life balance seems to be in our regular vernacular now, obviously. And there's obviously, some pitfalls from working from home, but there's also some positives working from home. How has this idea of, work-life balance affected those who've considered their home their office?
Yeah, it's such an important point. And, a lot of folks have coined the term work-life integration, which I am like A+, underlining, exclamation pointing all the time, because one of the things that we see often is, especially women that are parents, is they feel like they have to hide different parts of their life. Well, for me, I have a 5-year-old, I have a 2-year-old, and a T-minus 5-week-old, and I don't try to hide it. And there are times where, yes, I don't want them around because I want to focus 100%. But I also don't try to hide it. And I try to make it very welcoming for our team. And also, if there's a kid on camera, smiling at them and involving them in the conversation, because how awesome it is that they get to see their parent in the work environment. So it's all about integrating that. And if you have to head out in the middle of the day to do a dentist appointment, like to take your kid to whichever, that's fine. If you have to leave early so that you can take your kid to soccer practice. I have a garden party that they're doing for Mother's Day for both my kiddos that starts at 4 on Wednesday. And you better believe I'm going to not miss that, my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old. And here's the thing, you'll get more out of me because I'm going to be probably logging later, not that I should have to, but I'm so committed to our company and organization because I believe in our mission and it gives me that flexibility. So there's this big misconception that people are, taking off in the middle of the workday and they're not, focused. Well, the reality is by giving folks a more flexible schedule, you actually get more out of them and they value their work, they're aligned with your mission, but you're also respecting them as a human being as well to work when they feel they're best productive for their needs.
And you actually stole my next question. I was thinking about, I have a 1-year-old and I feel like I have her on Zoom every once in a while. My team loves her, honestly. But, I was thinking, is it okay for us to, acknowledge to our team or whoever we work with, like, hey, I have a child at home, like, you might hear crying or something in the back. Can we normalize that?
Heck yeah, we need to normalize that. And also we need to normalize dads. Dads are equal partners, are supposed to be equal partners in this. And I think by always associating moms with being the parents, we're normalizing moms being the default parents. And so I think dads in particular have a very important role to play with, by the way, bring up your kids so that way it makes others feel more comfortable doing it. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll mention here is it's like paid parental leave, right? Women shouldn't be the only ones taking maternity leave. Men need to be taking it as well, or else it will forever be the thing that sets women back in the workplace because we're always going to be behind and having to play catch up, whereas if both men and women are taking it. And so we need to have paid parental leave. Come on, rock on federal policy. Let's make that happen. And that's so important. It's also the time where if only moms are taking that time, that moms become the default parent. And that it starts when they're from their itty bitty, right? And moms become like the go-to parent. And so we need to do a lot more to normalize all sorts of things, not just having kids on camera, but the whole societal infrastructure surrounding it.
And I want to thank our audience for submitting your responses. So have you, seen or heard a child in the background of the Zoom that you were on? We're slowly starting to get responses now. So I'll kind of come back to that in a second. But I did want to check, what are some challenges, say, that people face when they're trying to start a company, knowing that, some of these external factors are there now, whereas they might not have been there before?
Yeah, so starting a company is always tough, right? And you are creating something from nothing. And so that means selling to customers. And whether, by the way, it's a for-profit or nonprofit, you always have customers or stakeholders, no matter what type of organization you're pushing forward. So one is getting something off the ground and building the infrastructure, because everything about it is hard, right? Setting up your incorporation and getting all of your legal infrastructure in place. And you're building something often from nothing. Often you come with some expertise or a special superpower, et cetera. But also you need fundraising resources, and maybe that's grants depending on the nature. Maybe it's from investors. Maybe it's, the good old fashioned way of raising money from customers and revenue. But it takes a little bit to get that off the ground and getting those first few folks that believe in you. And it is a hustle. It is a no days off job. And so when you're especially a new parent, that can be really difficult. But here's the thing. I think and I know we're going to get into this more, but I think there's no better time to really start a company, because you can be the boss of you and design a work schedule that works for you. And often it's solving a need, not always, but often surrounding some type of lived experience. And that was my experience with starting SimpliFed. I had a heck of a time with baby feeding with my first daughter. And then I learned under the Affordable Care Act that health plans are required to cover baby feeding support at no cost to families. And so wanted to democratize access to this to help other families. And so this is something that, I believe in so strongly, and it gets me through the days, especially because there is no days off. So you have to have a passion for it, because it can be challenging overcoming some of those boulders.
And, what was one thing you wish you had known back then versus now, or that you've learned kind of over this process of, founding a company and everything like that?
So biggest things I've learned are find a near peer mentor, someone that is one step ahead of you, not someone that's 30 years. While that will forever be helpful as well in leveraging their networks, you need to find someone that is one step ahead of you. This is because they have gone through what you're about to go through, and they've often, made the mistakes that hopefully they will prevent you from doing. And they could help with really tactical things. Okay, this platform is really helpful. Or I'm going to introduce you to this investor because they're very aligned with your mission. Maybe they weren't a fit for them, or even if they were, they can help create a path for you and overcome some of the issues that you might be stepping in, but hopefully won't.
And we had talked a little bit about, there's a point where a lot of women are not necessarily hitting a wall, but getting to a point where they're, kind of challenged to overcome that hump. And where is that in the process as far as founding a company?
Yeah, so in particular, here's what we know from the data. Take being a parent outside of it, but I'm sure it gets even worse when you have a 35-week pregnant bump like me, is we know from the data, and this is research that came out of MIT and a couple of other institutions, that when you had, say, a woman and a man pitching the exact same content, first audio only, so no visual, and then with an audio and a visual, we know that women were seen as less investable.
Oh, wow.
So there are tremendous biases out there, no doubt, and the research has shown that. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that by the time a woman gets enough experience, expertise, confidence, it's around the same time that she's having kids. And so I think one of the challenges is that how do you start a company when you have this crazy unpredictable life of being a parent. And, let's be real, kids are out sick all the time. And there's so many days where I'm like juggling a board meeting and having a sick toddler in the background, and they're like drawing on my hair. I'll never forget, I did this one investor pitch with my hair across my face like this. However, there is so many opportunities to leverage the now remote first culture that is out there. And I'll give a specific example of that. When I was raising my seed round, we closed $6 million almost a year to the date last year. I had to pitch 140 unique venture capital firms. I got 40 of them to engage in due diligence with my company, and then 6 ultimately ended up investing in us. And so that was just an insane amount of work. But here's the cool thing. I did that almost 100% remotely. Now, if you rewind pre-pandemic, there's no way I, with a young kid, or frankly any kids, would have been able to have 140 unique in-person meetings. Yeah. And so when you actually think about the logistics of what that would have taken, I wouldn't have been able to raise our round. And so there are a lot of opportunities to rethink what experiences look like, but especially we need to think about it for moms if we want to have a thriving economy.
And I want to thank the audience for your responses. So we asked the audience a little bit earlier, have they had or seen or maybe heard a child in the background of a Zoom before? And it looks like about 40 to 50% have at least heard a child in the background. I know my team has definitely heard some children in the background for sure. But I'd be interested to know, what are some positives that came out of, the pandemic? You had mentioned before that about, 28% of founders, I believe, are women, and then now it's about 50%. So what are some positives that kind of came out of, now working from home?
Yeah, having the ability to work from home, for instance, allowed me to reach a whole lot more people. It allows me to be so much more efficient and effective. And it also allows me to prioritize my time better and all people's times, right? Like there's no commute time, there's no getting ready time, or the getting ready time looks a lot different. But the biggest thing for me as an entrepreneur, along with what I mentioned with fundraising, is my ability to collaborate and partner with customers across the country. So for instance, there's definitely a blinders that you could put on of only having customers, say, in your area. Or I live in Ithaca, New York, and I love living in Ithaca, New York. It's an amazing place to live and raise a family, but let's be real, all of my customers aren't based in Ithaca. But even if you're based in Silicon Valley or Boston, New York City, all of your customers won't be based there. But now there's an ability to do business development with folks across the country or the world, depending on who your customer is. And then you can preserve that time that it often takes for traveling, not to mention the money to reinvest that or invest that into your business. So you can be a lot more efficient with the capital you have. Now, of course, you're going to need to do in-person meetings. Like there's nothing that will ever replace that. And I love, there's nothing better than working with a customer elbow to elbow to make that sale and build that relationship, the social dinners. No doubt that stuff is always going to happen. It will happen. But it's forcing us to think, all right, what does need to be in person and really what can be remote? And it also enables entrepreneurs to really democratize access to potential customers.
And Kira actually just checked in with a great question. So Kira asks, how do you feel about including childcare and value-based costs as an independent consultant / business owner?
So included as like a benefit or, So it's a great question. So how we do benefits, say at SimpliFed, is you get a set amount of money to do your benefits, and as your choice of how you would like to do that money. Maybe it's with your health insurance or a combination of other things. And I think more and more we need to have universal childcare as a federally funded entity, and there's a lot of disputes right now. But if we want to have more women in the workplace, either starting companies or at large organizations, we need a federal response to this. And I do think there's a portfolio approach where we can have businesses that are of the right size to invest in this as a benefit. And the reason is that we know that women, not just in entrepreneurship, but in leadership roles in companies, perform better. Like we know that companies just perform better. Like the data has said that time and time again. So the companies that find ways to support childcare or maybe fund it as a benefit will do better. And so I think there's a responsibility of larger organizations to have this as a benefit. And then for, say, small businesses where like they don't have, frankly, those types of funds or resources, I do think a government federal response. And the thing is, we need to stop thinking about it as philanthropy or, government intervention. It's good for our economy. It pays for itself. And the business it will create and the taxpayer dollar, it comes back. And so we need a portfolio approach of large companies supporting it. And for those independent contractors and small business, we need a federal response with resources. And again, it pays for itself because it creates an engine in our economy. Women are half the workforce. We're earning more degrees than men right now. But the biggest issue we face is we hit that maternal wall once we start having kids. And one of the big contributors to women leaving the workforce is not having childcare.
And I kind of want to transition a little bit. So, whenever you're managing a product or you're trying to develop a product or anything like that, or having product meetings, should women incorporate childcare into their timeline when it comes to developing a product? Should they, include extra time for childcare or anything like that? Is that something that they should factor in?
Yeah, I think it's both women and men, right? It goes back to normalizing both. And, depending on the pace at which you need things, yeah, absolutely, you need to consider that. But designing a plan and a schedule that works for you, whether that's in your, daily life of making things happen or weekly life or in your product development processes, right? You need to make sure that it works for you, because when it works for you, you will be more effective in the workplace, and that will allow you to develop products, but also it takes your considerations into effect. And so that's always really important.
And Susan actually just checked in with another great question. And Susan, thank you so much for submitting your question. So Susan asks, I'm planning on starting a physical therapy practice. What advice can you provide for those of us needing to have a brick and mortar type business? So maybe not a startup, but more of kind of a brick and mortar type business.
Well, first off, this is, I think we need federal intervention for small businesses. I think, large Fortune 500 companies need to do their fair share. But for someone like Susan that's looking to start a physical therapy practice, this is exactly why we need federal intervention, so that we can get universal child care support to support folks like her. The big thing is, you're the boss of you. You're the boss of you. So maybe you can get childcare Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you can't get it Mondays through Wednesdays, Fridays. So make sure that you design your practice around the days that work for you. Also, virtual physical therapy, and this in Susan's example, is a thing, and it's becoming more and more powerful. And by the way, patients and clients love it too. And there is a way to have a hybrid practice in your work environments, whether it's healthcare. And a lot of people think physical therapy is very high touch. Actually, there's a big boom of virtual physical therapy right now. So again, designing your schedule and your practice and your business so it works for you. And then secondly, think about how you might be able to provide things virtually. There is I believe in Germany, a library that has a place like pods with computers, and they have like a little carved out area where there's like toys and like all sorts of things for kids to play with, and frankly they're kind of like bundled in, and so that's really great because you could be working and maybe doing a virtual appointment, still being professional. And I think there's a way to do it. Maybe give the patient a heads up. If it is super disruptive, you could reschedule or that kind of thing. But I do think it's important that we all recognize that we need to rethink what work looks like.
I love that idea. I'm going to try to steal that from Germany at some point.
steal Europeans, they know.
Steal the pods. I want to just real quickly, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on, taking a step back and trying to think through, kind of pitch meetings and all those types of things. You had mentioned that as soon as, women are experienced enough to have their startups and know what they need to know, they're getting ready to have children. How can we kind of get over that barrier of kind of getting women into startups sooner, and that way we can kind of get over that, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's about creating on-ramps for both women and men, but in particular for women, creating on-ramps, but also exposing the fact that it is possible. It is hard. It is very difficult to be an entrepreneur, being pregnant. Oh my gosh, you probably see the baby kicking on, and having 2 young kiddos during a pandemic. They're getting sick every other week. It's a disaster. But I also think we need to normalize that and make it okay. And I know in our company and with the people we partner with and our customers is that, they're going through it too. So I think we need to be very open about these types of things. And so it allows more folks to come into it, because a lot of people, I think, are scared off of it because they look at their schedule. But here's the cool thing is it's flexible. Like, you have to work very hard. I'm not saying I'm not hustling all the time. I am always be selling, right, when you're an entrepreneur, but it also is a way you can make your own schedule and make it work for you. And that's also critical.
And what are some ways that we can normalize, having children on meetings for those who might be hesitant? I know, for me, we have a morning stand-up every morning, and, every once in a while I'm grabbing the infant to kind of bring the volume down. But what are some ways we can kind of normalize having, children on our meetings every once in a while?
One, well, just having them there and calling it out and smiling at them. And then I think it's also making sure, behind the scenes, when people are like, I don't think they're focused and just normalizing it. Now, and the way you essentially control for that is you have metrics, right? You have metrics. If someone's underperforming, it may or may not have to do with them having kids. And it's about having metrics and objectives and key results and key performance indicators to essentially track progress. And as long as folks are tracking towards their progress, both qualitative and quantitative, then who cares if their kid is on the screen? And if they're not tracking to progress, then that's something to have a conversation about. So it's about holding folks accountable with metrics, but then giving them the freedom to design a work schedule that works for them.
And you touched on this a little bit ago, but I wanted to kind of reintroduce it. What are some policies that could kind of better help support more women participating in starting their own business?
Well, there's a few things. So I already talked about paid parental leave for both mom and dad. I already talked about universal child care support. We have K through 12 education, but yet during the 0 to 5 stage, which are arguably the most vulnerable, the most time intensive, we have nothing. Doesn't make any sense. But I also think there's a lot to be said about taking a step back and looking at how we're investing in different early stage innovations. Let me give you an example. In healthcare, when you look at NIH funding, the vast majority of funding goes to diseases that tend to be more male related. Women tend to start companies that are women's health companies. But when you look at the NIH budget, women's health related conditions and diseases are disproportionately not represented. So we need to make sure that federal funding dollars are going to the places that represent our population, right? Again, it's not philanthropy, it's just damn good business. And as an example, in healthcare, women make 70 to 80% of all healthcare decisions, or half the population, so half of healthcare. On the consumer side, women make actually 70 to 80% of consumer decisions as well. But in the healthcare realm, let's actually put funding where it proportionally belongs. And so what does that mean for startups? Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR grants, they come from HHS and all sorts of government entities. Let's make sure that we're funding those at the rates they should be going to women, and having the right amount of funding to women's health diseases, as an example. Let's make sure that the SBIR review panels are representative of different genders and races and ethnicities. When I applied for an SBIR, 17 out of 20 were men, and I run a baby feeding and breastfeeding company, a women's health company. And I got all sorts of comments in my SBIR review that said, oh, this isn't a huge pain point. Well, let me tell you about baby feeding and breastfeeding. It is a huge pain point that impacts women's physical and mental health. And so when we don't have the right investments going in to women-led startups, we're already putting women a step back, along with all the other societal infrastructures in place.
And I just wanted to real quickly check in with our audience. So Claire checks in, and Claire asks, any advice on the mom guilt you experience when balancing work and family? Not being 1,000% present tends to deflate motivation on the work side.
Oh, Claire, I'm with you. Huge mom guilt all the time. It's real, it's present. I just know that another type of guilt I would feel is not starting this company. And by the way, whatever you decide for your work, whether that's inside the home, outside the home, I don't think it should be referred to as taking a step back to care with your kids. It's your choice, and that's the biggest thing. Women need more choices in society more broadly right now, but especially in work environments. And do I have mom guilt? But what makes me feel better is knowing that I'm tackling what I believe is to be a huge challenge that are impacting other women. And my girls see me working and they see me how passionate I am and excited and totally have mom guilt. There's this day on the couch, they each have, they're 5 and 2, their little laptops, their pretend toy laptops. And both of them independently went over to the couch because they see me always on my laptop working. And they pulled out their little like toy laptops and they started doing it. And they just did it on their own, and at first I was like, oh, what type of example am I setting for my kids? And then I took a step back and I'm like, wait a second, they're trying to be me. I'm their role model right now. And so actually, like, I very quickly switched, like, wow, they actually like think it's cool, and that's their mom and I'm their role model. So feel guilt all the time, but it's about protecting your time as much as possible. Going to that, garden party at my daughter's daycare that I mentioned, you got to protect that time. And by the way, that makes me a much more effective both parent, but also entrepreneur and founder.
And I think we really need to let people know that, spending time with your kids will make you,
better,
more productive.
Yeah.
How do we get that point across to people that, hey, you spend time with your kids and that'll make you more productive? How do we get that point across to folks?
I think this is where the men come in. I think y'all have an equal part to play in this and making sure that women don't have to feel bad about talking about it. And if we normalize it across both genders, then we'll be in a good spot.
I love that. And this actually brings us to our third audience question. So again, scan the QR code with your phone. We'll get your responses here. So I'd like to ask the audience, what's been kind of the hardest thing about working from home for you? But as we kind of wait for your responses, I know the hardest thing for me, at least, is, like you said, having my little 1-year-old walking around and playing with toys and stuff like that. How do we kind of handle when we're working with prototypes and things like that, and maybe kids might grab it, think it's a toy? What's the best way to handle that?
Oh, well, this is a tough one. So on my desk at home, I have like a bunch of different props that I use, maybe when we're speaking with customers, what have you. And I just one postcard that shows one things that we do and provide to partners. And my little daughter, she took out a pen and she wrote all over it. And then she took her little kid scissors and cut out a big chunk of it. And I didn't know. So this happens. And the thing is, it's okay, right? You just make light of it and try to be prepared as much as possible to prevent that. But again, often whoever you're speaking with is been exposed to that too. And just like anything in life, you got to put your stuff away. I have my work desk that's actually in the middle of all the clutter of our house. And there are some days when there's crayons and markers all over it. And honestly, I kind of love it because it is just what it is. And I'd rather have that any day than having to commute into a work environment. So trade-offs.
And do you find that most people are understanding when you say hey, I have a baby with me or I have a child with me?
Yeah, I told the story earlier how when my daughter was home one day sick and she was pulling my hair across my face. Honestly, I love the investor I was speaking with because they did not skip a beat. They just kept going as if we were, they weren't there, and deep respect to that investor because they knew that's what I wanted. I had business to attend to. And yeah, my daughter was putting my hair across my face. But the thing is, they knew that I was there. I was there to come and raise money. And so I really appreciated them not skipping a beat. And so, yeah, be friendly and kind to the kid, of course, but don't also feel like you need to dilute down what was supposed to be accomplished at that meeting because the parent will actually feel bad if they don't get to accomplish what their business goals were.
And for those husbands out there, what can we do to better support our spouses?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to, partnership and not letting moms be the default parent. Making sure your name is on the call list for when they're sick. Making sure you're taking turns with the sick schedule. Making sure that, that middle of the night, whether your kid is 8 and having a nightmare or, 2 months old, that you're participating in those night sessions so a woman isn't tired and set at a disadvantage. Equal partnership at home is what I think all moms want. And, there's sadly a lot of divorces in this country. And one of the big trends that divorce lawyers have said is that it's when dads are not respecting their partner, whether they're working inside or outside the home, and not taking that equal part in parenting and allowing mom to become the default parent and not seeing what's wrong with that. And so I think dads, it's so important that you are equal partners. And there are many amazing dads out there, but be a partner and also look out for the woman in your workplace too, and making sure that you're also being vocal about your child needs too. And by the way, dads shouldn't be applauded when they're doing the same amount of work that moms are doing. Right? There's all that narrative, good job, Dad. It's your job too. You are part of this.
So dads, do a little bit more. We have to remember that.
Yeah.
So you have just a little bit of time left. So I want to know, if you could kind of reach out to our audience and, give them one piece of advice or one thing to think about, to kind of walk away with when they're thinking about, trying to balance having a child at home and starting a company or, developing a prototype. What's that one thing you would want them to walk away with?
All right. Well, real talk. One thing I want you to walk away from is that it is not roses and sunshine and rainbows. It is tough. It is hard. And if it's something you're passionate about and important to you professionally, financially, mental health-wise, then it's worth it. But there are going to be days that are absolutely terrible. And I know that sounds so dreary, but I just want to acknowledge that it's hard. And it's okay if you're having days you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Then make the best choice for you. It's all about your choice and what you want to do in this matter. But just know that this is an opportunity that you may or may not get back. But again, make the best choice for you, and there are going to be hard days.
And I just want to thank the audience again for your responses. And it looks like we've gotten a bunch of different responses in. And one of the things that they mentioned was yelling. Have you ever experienced yelling in the background at home?
Oh, heck yeah. And if from my humans and kids and screaming and yeah, you're trying to ask a good question or someone's asking and there's just screaming. And by the way, you think it's a lot worse than it is. Definitely. Zoom in particular has gotten real good at getting rid of the background noise. So it's always worse for the person that's experiencing the yelling in the background of their home. And so just keep on going. I used to dance, do tap and jazz growing up. I was a terrible dancer. But there was one thing that my dance teacher taught me. She's like, Andrea, if you mess up your feet, a move, just keep on going and keep on smiling. Don't call attention to it too. So if there's yelling, feel free to call attention to it, but just keep on blazing forward. And if it gets to be distracting, then someone will tell you, but get what you need to get done.
Yes, as parents, for the both of us, we've definitely experienced yelling. And yes, so you are not alone for whoever submitted yelling. So we have a little bit of time left. Very last question. Mother's Day's on Sunday. You're expecting a third. What would you like for Mother's Day? Oh my gosh, this is I love this question. So there's a big trend going right now, what do moms want for Mother's Day? And it's not flowers. I mean, I love flowers. It's sleep. But really, if I had to have my dream Mother's Day, I want paid parental leave. I want universal child care support. For my company, I want enforcement of ACA, Affordable Care Act policy surrounding health plans cover breastfeeding support. I want policies. I want real action in society. I don't need flowers. Sleep would be cool. Last Mother's Day, I actually chose to spend it without my kids, and that was my choice. So that was very controversial. But I had the greatest time. I had a nice little break. Sleep's good, break's good. I'm thinking for my wife this year, give her a break. Yeah, sleep is great. Go do what you want to do. Night alone in a hotel, awesome.
welcome.
That's perfect. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you in studio. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all your responses. We want to hear kind of how we did, so we'll share a quick link in the web browser there. You can give us some comments, anything like that. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for participating, and we'll see you at the next keynote. Have a good afternoon.